there seems to have been an approach that, the federal administration should do as little as possible and basically react. And what I hear you saying is, a lot of what you folks were trying to do is, okay, here's the issue of the day. Let's rally both internal and a lot of external constituents to move, at pace to come up with ways to take advantage of this opportunity or address this issue, and basically create momentum, but be a catalyst. Is that a fair way to think about some of the things you were able to do?
Very much so. I think we maybe not divided, but we were working in 3 sectors that were overlapping a lot, or methodologies. One is really classic policy, like, should we have an open source policy, technology policy and technology for policy. And Anish Chopra, who was first CTO, really drove that. We continued that, default open data, unless it's private data. IRS data is not open, but that weather data, these data should be open. And we see on our phones every day the results of US Geological Survey and mapping data being open. Companies can build products. One of my favorite things that happened was the US Census team, the administrator was amazing. And we were able to flow all kinds of things in there. And so the Opportunity Project allowed us to use open data sets from HUD and ED and all these agencies that might have said, hey, can you guys help me with a website? Instead, we said, what data do you have? Let's take HUD, Housing Urban Development. You could say, what are you trying to do? They'd say housing mobility, housing affordability, all their key goals. Then we'd say, wait a minute, Airbnb, Redfin, Zillow, all the industry, come here. What data sets do you have? What kind of features could you all launch in your highly popular products that would broaden the capabilities here? How could nonprofits get along? How can we see better? So that's an example of a policy move, and then maybe an organizing move. So the first one was policy. The second was capacity build this government, which was really what Todd started, and we continued. He sort of came, he's like, where's everyone? He had made multiple companies, and he's like, so Presidential Innovation Fellows, an entrepreneur in residence, everywhere. These wonderful colleagues we see, bring them in government, do a tour of service. Government is only who shows up, right? So come serve your country. The United States Digital Service Capabilities, the 18F team, which is in the General Services Administration, agency teams and IT teams, finding colleagues within government who are already there, who just needed hey, I'm trying to do this in a little air cover so that the secretary and the DepSec could know. That was amazing. And the third one was really, we called Innovation Nation, which is how can the American people, how can we see what they are already doing and more rapidly share? One of my favorite ones, to your point about, the policy, we were talking about the policies that were happening. President Obama was working in criminal justice reform. And so Valerie Jarrett and others were like, what do you guys, how can you play in? And policy work, government work. Well, one of them was just looking at who in the country was already doing extraordinary work, like Scout and Scale. And so examples that came, the Presidential Innovation Fellows, some of them and others began working with Domestic Policy Council on the Police Data Initiative, opening data on officer-involved shooting, use of force data. Dallas, others were already opening this. And here's a photo of a young woman, her name is Grace. She's in 10th grade teaching the police chief how to code. So we're doing STEM together with a real city problem, work on your hometown for your homework. And so we were able to get 120 jurisdictions, also data-driven justice, which is more of what has the enterprise done. Camden had half their murder rate, dropped their police brutality, really shifted the funding on policing. Miami had done that. 7,000 people were in prison. They dropped to 4,700. Closed a jail, saved $12 million by taking mental health and substance abuse challenge, people who are facing the challenges, and routing to services instead of jail. And they were able to reduce their prison population, save incredible money and strife. And so how do we have Miami share? They're busy being Miami, they're not Wichita. So creating communities of practice and flow, almost like IPOing. And Tech Hire was like that. The coding boot camps were coming. And so how did you get more people in cities? Code Louisville was happening, and Launch Code in St. Louis. How could they share faster? So we had 5 or 6 cities go to 20, go to 40, go to 70. And we had 70 people in the Tech Hire ecosystem. It's a kind of a not government program, right? It's just an organizing, community organizing. And then Katie Ryan Burke found a $150 million budget in the Department of Labor. We call them dusty budgets. There's so much money. The US government is the richest thing in the world. So just look around the budget and find something and ask, does this apply to this group of retraining? They're like, of course. And all these proposals came in. 39 cities got, a couple $1 million each. I remember Albuquerque's program had foster care kids aging out, veterans, people coming out of prison, single parents, like all kinds of folks were getting training for jobs that pay 3 times the average American salary, and the cities are starving for them. So this is the kind of third area, which is really an innovation organizing move and using the network that we have, both human and digital, to faster share what's already working or promising. I'll pop a link actually for you guys of some of that stuff.
Yeah, that'd be great, Megan. Appreciate that. And while you're doing that, let me turn a little bit to the Greater Washington region, since that's a remit for this group. And the partnership's an interesting construct. It's about 30 of the largest employers from Baltimore to Richmond. It's consciously Baltimore to Richmond. And obviously DC's at the center of all this, but it from the start was all about what can we do on a regional level that augments, accelerates what we're trying to do otherwise. And some of the work has historically been around things like mobility, transportation. It's a logical one where there really wasn't anyone driving the hard decisions that have to be taken to make sure that you've got regional approaches on some of these things. Work on housing with Urban Institute, a lot of work on digital skills to try to broaden and deepen the pipeline of people in the region who have those capabilities. But over the last few months, of course, the whole question of reopening, scaling testing, just sort of how can we augment what's not happening so that we can all, get back to a reasonable life, particularly for schools, faster. But a lot about inclusion too, right? I mean, I think since with Black Lives Matter, since the death of George Floyd, the companies, to their credit, have all said inclusion is, it's not a CSR kind of thing. It's what we're all fundamentally about. And I think where we've come to is a view that, kind of inclusion is the new innovation, that, if you've got a region that is first and foremost about inclusion, really is the most inclusive economy in the country, it will by definition become the most attractive economy in the country. That all the, sort of things that we found in Colorado that got folks to want to come there 20 years ago, if you are fundamentally inclusive and have that as your primary objective, that is what the folks that we want to have come into the region think as paramount. So we've got a lot of work going on to try to figure out, what does it mean to say that inclusive growth is foundational to the work that we do? And then what can something like the partnership do in a region like this to augment that? So love to just get some thoughts from you as you think about inclusive growth, inclusive innovation. If you think about sort of inclusion as the foundation for, sort of an old school term, but for economic development on a, regional basis, what comes to mind? What are things that you've seen, places that look like they've got some of this going well, obstacles, just thoughts would be great.
Yeah, there's first off, there's great stuff all around a region. People should be really proud. And the more we can cross share what's going well, one of my favorite programs, it's youth and some adults, but it's Rec to Tech up in Baltimore. And we talk about fab labs and makers and 3D printing and all this stuff. But really thinking about a studio like a library, what do you want to make today? What do you need? What's urgent? And one of my favorite things is watching, especially as people get maker spaces and these fab spaces in schools, watching the arts and history teachers. And then I love our math and science teachers, of course they're going to use them. But when the other teachers start to realize that this is a cool place to just build and express, there was a school that was doing, social justice meets the makerspace and what would you physically make? Students doing really interesting sort of art/makers pieces. So Rec to Tech is Rec Center to Tech Center. It's a rec center. And so repurposing these beautiful spaces that we have like libraries and others and adding rooms or opening rooms, dusting them off and putting capabilities. In this case, they have Nano and Mega. Nano's the little kids, Mega's the big kids, and the big kids teach the little kids, which is great for everybody. You know, and one of my favorite ones was a little bubblegum machine. And one of the first starter projects is to just learn how to make something in 3D printing and then pop it into the box so the little kids can get one, you know, and they have coins to get that. Just clever things. And these teams are just, you know, it's learning the confidence. It's about confidence building around STEM. And so that's a wonderful example. There's those kinds of resources are around. The thing that I loved, this scout and scale idea, you know, we did the UN, we met because of the United Nations Solution Summit that we put together, which was as the world was ratifying the Sustainable Development Goals. I have my SDG pin, you know, with water.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I gotta go grab mine. Yeah, I've got mine here too.
You know, and these are the global goals for people who aren't familiar. It's like, you know, climate goals and economic inclusion and gender equality and poverty and hunger and every goal, and they're well thought out. My business partner Susan Osborne was at the center of bringing the public voice when she was working at the UN, and so that's how we partnered. And the question we had, which is also something we could regionally do, and you guys did in Colorado at the time, who's already solving these many challenges we have? What are you doing? This is a very Silicon Valley-like move, right? The venture capitalists don't make the companies, they find these innovators. It's just that we've given so much voice to one group and a whole other sets of people aren't able to get the resource they need. So let's open for business. And let's ask who's already fixing things. I found my Colorado Solutions Summit.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
that's great.
You know, this is the global goals.
You win the prop award. This is awesome.
So, you know, this was coming together with the university, you know, and I remember actually now Governor Hickenlooper was there with us. And we did some of this during the Tech Jobs Tour. This is getting people to talk to each other. A lot of times we get this idea of, well, let's talk to the economic people. So then we're talking to the companies and we're talking to the research part of the university and these things, but we could instead talk to them and we could add in the community, various community, the churches. Like the thing about our region is it's people and the people have the capability. So the more we include the breadth of people, the more breadth. And one of my favorites, when I got another prop for you, this is a book from the Hull House, which I hadn't known much about. So I don't know if you know about Jane Addams, Double D Addams, but most people don't know about her. She won the Nobel Peace Prize for inventing social work, but they created this Hull House in the middle of industrial age Chicago in the second industrial revolution everybody talks about now, the fourth. And I hadn't realized until I went upstairs that they did amazing data science. These are the city boards.
Wow.
And this is the wages and what jobs were there. So what they were working on was the smart wise city. I call it the smart wise city. And the smart wise city isn't just like the robots are shipping us around and smart driving cars. It's about us and the wisdom that the collective genius of our collaborations can have. And so the key is to, you know, a lot of people say, why aren't there more people coming to tech, you know, from different groups? And like, well, have we created hospitable environments? And also, what are they working on? Why don't we join their team and see what they're trying to prioritize? And then maybe some of our capabilities can come with that. So how do we mix it up much more across these silos? Both the thing we've been talking about for government is break the silos of who's in the room, you know, include all the capabilities. In this case, break the silos across the different sectors of society and kind of play the whole orchestra together and make sure that the senior leadership is broadened so that all of the leaders, no matter what age, you know, who are really driving in creative ways to solve things are included in the conversation. And that we find the people, the easiest thing, of course, is to find someone who already fixed it. So that's why I love, or promising, I love finding them, you know, and then you're like, wait, what did you do? And then, you know, start to support them in that way. And we have so many people in our region who have already done that, and other regions who we can collaborate with. So I'm very excited that you guys are here because I know you think in this networked way.
Yeah. No, look, that's awesome, and we do. And it's interesting coming from Colorado to kind of observe the differences. I've sort of lived in Colorado from the point where it was siloed, and there was like cable TV and oil and gas, and those were the industries, and agriculture, I guess. To really kind of a very grassroots, ground up, energize the collective to do stuff and then share fast and scale quick. And one of the interesting things that I've observed, just interested in your views on this, is there's also, it's the classic sort of cultural question. I mean, the nice thing about Colorado was like even oil and gas, that was kind of a risk-taking sort of world. It was, yeah, we're going to put some money down, probably won't hit, lose all our money, we'll try it again, whatever. Ranching, similar. I mean, it's pretty hardy and pretty tough. Here, there's a lot of, big, successful, stable contracting firms,
Mhm.
that look at some of the work that that you've done and I've done, things like the Colorado Solution Summit, whatever, and sort of go, what is that thing? Right?
Yep.
How do I, it just looks like everything looks like an alpha and feels really uncomfortable, right? So and it takes time, right, to get folks to the point that they see the value in all of that. But I don't know, you've been in this region, obviously you travel around the country as well, but any observations about what's sort of unique if you think about kind of Maryland, Virginia, DC, Baltimore down to Richmond? Obviously there's the really unique history. The differences between Baltimore and Richmond are extraordinary. You mentioned people, and there's just so much talent here. Some of it's in for a bit, some of it's gone. But what else sort of strikes you as different about the region? And I can ask because I've only been here for a few months, so I can tap into your.
I wasn't planning to come to DC. I got pulled by President Obama. I didn't know about this. And I encourage anybody, serve your country at some point, do a tour of service in government. And we need all of us to do it. It's so beautiful here. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. I guess maybe, one of the things, there's so many things. I think the history, I think also the whole history is really important. Like Churchill said, the further back you can look, the farther forward you will see. And so being more inclusive, as I was thinking, as you were mentioning Colorado, I was remembering one of your colleagues, Nina Sharma, we went to see Captain Ed Dwight, who was,
Oh yeah, that was amazing.
He was in the first group of astronauts, African-American, and when Kennedy was shot, he was given a transfer, and that's a hidden figure story. People don't know that Kennedy's goal was to have an interracial team. He hadn't figured out gender equality, but on the moon first, and we didn't do that, and that was unfortunate. I love who went to the moon, and it would have been nice to broaden that too, certainly in those early Apollo groups, and the Mercury 13, et cetera. So we need to tell the whole story of the history and really with agency of how incredible work that people did, no matter what position they were in. We're talking about President Washington, him asking for an audience with the poet Phyllis Wheatley. I've been recently tracking on a story about Eliza Hamilton, who I hadn't realized spoke Mohawk and was inducted into the Onondaga and Mohawk tribes at 13. So, federalism, Benjamin Franklin said definitely, like history-wise, our Constitution is based on the Haudenosaunee Iroquois Confederation, Federation, and the Great Law of Peace. And so how much influence did Eliza have and others and the Mohawks? So there's so I encourage us using that, Ada Lovelace invented computer science and talked about AI at the same time as Frankenstein was written by Mary Shelley when Mary was with her father. So like the whole history is here, even though it's hidden. So I think that's important for us because it makes us be more inclusive and see the future. And then I think maybe some of almost the Chesapeake, and the regionality, the beautiful way that our land is, people are place-based. And so there are many things there to draw from. I think environmental opportunities for innovation and collaboration and building on the histories there.
Yeah.
And again, my number one thing is scout and scale. Like figure out who's already doing stuff, look broadly, do it in an open way, so that you really capture not just the folks you already know about, but all the other people, and be open to different ways of thinking about it. We ring a bell between our subjects at school. when the kids change classes, like, why are we doing that? Right? We don't need to do that in our lives. The universe is just interconnected,
Yeah.
and the people are.
Well, speaking of Scout and Scale, I know when you mentioned we met through the Solution Summit, and in many ways you were kind of the creator of that, and that just struck me as the way that you went about creating it as an effort. I've taken a lot of lessons from that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Like, how did that come about?
Yeah.
What was the process? You know, how did you find the solutions? Right. That was one of the things that
Yeah.
was always just amazing to me. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's two key things, two key insights that come together there. One is mine, and one is actually Susan Alsner, my business partner in the UN team at the time. My perspective, because I'm always like thinking about innovators of all kinds, is, well, we have these great goals, like who's already working on them? How do we find them? Right. So no, I know if you mention a problem, there's 7 billion plus people. So somebody in this world is working on that. And probably several people. And what are they doing? It's very much the same with the Malala Fund. Malala will lead us around girls' education, youth education, just like Elon is taking us to space, right? So people do things. So finding them. So that was part of that. And then Punita Hira, who's one of the other co-founders of Shift 7, met Susan Alsner at the UN. She was in our White House team at the time, in the CTO team. And she sort of asked this question, could we do this? And Susan said, sure, I know how to do that, because she was running all the public engagement. And so her innovation was, if we're going to talk about refugees and migrants, let's have refugees and migrants come. If we're going to talk about, whoever the topic is, let's have, it's really design thinking from an engineering perspective, like who are the users or the people affected, the people who are most marginalized or facing the challenge or doing that are the most knowledgeable typically, and, inevitably. And so it was in this conversation that this kind of two ideas came together. So look for the doers already solving something, promising something existing. When we run the Solution Summit, it's not your idea, your post-it note, but what are you already making? Bernice is making bamboo bikes and scaled, and it's already made thousands in Ghana, because they don't have a steel industry. She's sequestering carbon and bamboo and making these beautiful, they look like beautiful surfboards, beautiful bikes. Or, the Logistimo team who's doing vaccine distributions, like on and on, just genius solutions from every part of the world. And because we opened it using Susan's method, the way she had structured that was to do an open call and then make an open selection committee, and then make sure the committee was representational, like gender balance, region balance, topic balance. We were lucky you came in to the committees, as an engineering, dean, expert in these stuff. So topics. So having this breadth, then look through the solutions and then nominate, and then the UN would do the final selections. But it was a way to really scout in an open way. And so we've continued that work at Shift 7. So the Solution Summit has, the fifth year attracted 1,400 solutions from over 141 countries in 3 weeks on an open web form. It's open, people can see it, we can share that. And so there's been over 65. We've also taken that methodology to work with island innovators. We work with MIT, with Native American innovators in the MIT Solve Indigenous Communities Fellows. Why wouldn't we go to reservations and other places and ask what people were solving and doing, just like we would to Silicon Valley or Austin or Boston, right? Anywhere in the world. And then you hosted us for the Tech Jobs Tour, which was an early project of just, again, organizing the place-based colleagues who are getting people to the kind of future of work in an inclusive way, coding boot camps and other methodologies, and creating welcoming festivals, not a competition, to really invite people and make sure the culture is hospitable to everybody, and that you bother to reach out. Matali was the genius behind that. And she'd social storm the city before we were coming. We went to 25 different cities, Cheyenne and Birmingham and Cleveland, everywhere, and really social storm the social organizations and the churches and everybody, as well as the tech sector, and people came. We had 2,000 people in Oakland trying to figure out how to get into the tech sector right there in Silicon Valley. And it was incredibly diverse group of people.
we should social storm vaccine resistance, right? Go in and use all those venues and find the way to get people excited, right?
Yeah, to help each other.
Right, exactly. Yeah, a couple of other things. You mentioned Shift 7. Talk a little bit more about what you folks are doing, maybe a couple of representative projects so people can understand that.
Sure. Shift 7, if you look at your keyboard, shift and 7 means and. And so we wanted to work in partnership, and we only work together. And our idea was, I just felt like instead of going back into pure tech, like there's tons of us. I love my colleagues, they're doing amazing things. But how about stay as tech and innovation people in places where a bit more rare, and blend some of these methods with our genius colleagues from these other sectors. Maybe we can help move faster, more effectively, more broadly, more inclusively. And so we end up, if you look at the shift7.com website, you'll see sort of a cluster of interrelated activities, and then we apply them to a lot of topics. So kind of studio, sprints and pilots, and the kind of like work that you do when you're prototyping together. Second one is really networking and ecosystem and place-based, like I kind of call that y'all should meet each other. And that glue layer is often missing. That's why I'm excited about the Greater Washington Partnership, is that glue layer of sharing. And the third one is kind of media storytelling. Let's call that as seen on TV. And a lot of times things that work are not as much included, or the balance, like, these stories of lost histories, or, I recommended the Katherine Johnson for the Medal of Freedom. President Obama chose her, like, she's incredible. Who knew that an African-American woman calculated us to the moon? Mathematical genius, and many other trajectories for that future. So how do you make sure that we shift from deep media bias? So we've been working with those different innovation communities. We work on policy, a lot of challenges around bias in AI, bias in data, face recognition, this rather racist camera that we have, that needs light balancing for some skin tones and not others. Like, this is horrific encoding of racism and sexism and other things into our technology products. So a really broad range of work that we're up to, and we welcome partnerships.
Great. Well, and I put a link to the website in the chat now that I figured out how to share in the chat, not just across the panelists. So I've now won the technology day. You win the award for having the greatest props, though, Megan. I mean, that's incredible.
I'm a mechanical engineer, so
I know it's great. If there's not a thing, it's not real, right?
Yeah.
But that's great. Hey, last question for me, and then I know we're getting toward the end of the time. So just wanted to thank you again for taking the time. It's just so exciting to have the chance to talk with you again. And but I want to go back a little bit to sort of internationalism, globalism, sustainable development goals. You and I talked a little bit about, gee, could we harmonize the sustainable development goals with the grand challenges, right? Because there are these frameworks and there's all these things. And but we've been in a period of time where America's disengaged from a lot of things around the world, and now we're going to go back to re-engaging. And if you think about that, and again, just back to the regional question, how do you think about things like the Sustainable Development Goals as a frame for that work?
I think that I love them as a frame because they're so broad, and so there's something in them for everyone. And also, one of the things we found when we were working with the different Solution Summit solution makers, it's not like they're like doing one of them. They overlap. They're meant to be in a cluster, and so you can say, "Oh, my solution is across all these different sectors." Or, there was one group that was working on, they were people who worked on green buildings, and they realized they kept shipping the waste. And so they figured out how to do all the food waste, all kinds of food waste, grinding, and these machines, they're called Mako, they're from Malaysia, in 24 hours make soil in your basement. So just smart stuff, right? Like, that fixes many different things. So if you look at the different solutions out there, they usually overlap. There are people, first off, in our region who are already solving. And what I loved when you guys did Flight to Denver, bringing the solution makers from the UN Solution Summit to match with and have an entire weekend with the Colorado solution makers as teammates, like, who's doing similar things. It just creates surface area of action and acceleration, and having the validation that your idea is not crazy, having, just some acceleration of your specific work, like really paying attention to what each other's trying to do or groups and come help. I think one of the keys is our youth. Our youth are our high schools, are ways of teaching, and we have such genius teachers who are hiding in classrooms with their solutions for us. How do we help them bring forward the stuff they've figured out to do within budget and within the curriculum rules that's really active STEM, active engagement? One of my favorite ones out of LA that we should steal for our region is called the Data Science Federation. And, I think data science will become a capstone for high school, like calculus, that it's something there. And in our computer science for all work, which is everyone learns to code before you graduate from high school, maybe a little bit in kindergarten, but also computer science for any topic. It's just as much for social justice and arts as it is for commercial use or robotics. So how do you broaden that? And one of the things that Jean Holm did in LA, who's the deputy mayor, she's a UCLA data science faculty member. So she asked her city teams what challenges they had. And then she went to the college level and assigned those problems as capstone projects. So it isn't production software for the city, but it's a demo prototype dashboard. And for the students, it broadens their experience of data science rather than what I think of as a professor. It's, oh, wow, I could work on the city's homelessness issue. I could work on air quality. I could work on, transportation. I could work on homelessness, whatever the challenges are. And so I think work on your hometown for your homework is a big opportunity for our region. Because the breadth of what we need and the framing of that using the Sustainable Development Goals could be extraordinary. And leveraging Greater Washington Partnership and others to more rapidly share what everyone's doing across our region without silos is very powerful.
Yeah. 100%. But a few takeaways. I wrote down a bunch of stuff, which my handwriting's so bad that I've almost failed first grade twice. So, but I will interpret these things. But one of the things that I really liked about our conversation, Megan, is if we look into this year when we can get together again. So you talked about things like festivals. And so much of this is about sort of rapid, quick cross-silo. It's not Zoom, right? It's how do we actively create that surface area, and a lot of the serendipity we were able to create, and a lot of those connections was because we made those connections by definition across those kind of silos. And I think certainly one of the things that I'm looking forward to this year is being able to do that again. And I think with respect to inclusion, with respect to underrepresented groups, et cetera, I think it's going to be hypercritical that we accelerate those kind of activities as fast as we can, because people, I think, are pretty bereft of all that with everything that's gone on.
Very much so. And really, one of my favorite things, I was just thinking a little bit about the Fab Lab network, which is the Makerspace network. We started a little bit in the conversation talking about that. But Neil Gershenfeld, Sherry Lassiter, the creators of that, at one point they were working with Mel King, who leads, this is a Boston story, but it's similar to us. And Mel was in one of the areas, South End. And Neil and everybody's saying, hey, you should bring your kids over to MIT, which is fine. But he's like, well, why don't you bring your stuff over here? And so the South End Makerspace Fab Lab is one of the coolest spaces. And so really going where each other are and understanding what people are trying to accomplish, creating listening capabilities for people to hear each other. Because when we hear each other and what we're already doing or trying to do, humans want to help each other. It's just in our nature. We want to team up. We want to be social, and being social in a purposeful way matters. And the young people really, really care about this. One of the programs I'd love to bring, I'll show you another picture, is the Arizona started Chief Science Officers. These are kids who came to visit us in the White House. Imagine, like, we're a government place. And so many of us who, have come from government, maybe we're like a class president or student council. Well, why wasn't there a chief science officer in your high school or in your middle school, who was driving things? And what these kids do, they work on helping other students love STEM in a way that would matter for them and doing something that matters in your community. That's their goal. And they do it. And there's over 800 in the country now as well. And also in, I think, Kuwait, Mexico, and Kenya. So this is a network of kids who can join us and be in there. So again, back to that example of network the networks, get in the studio together, and make sure the media helps pick up some of these stories. When we talk about a problem, share some solution makers too, is key.
Yeah, this is great. Megan, I know every time we get on a call or we have a meeting, I know we feel like we could go forever, and I know I could, but I wanted to thank you for taking the time. Thanks for all that you're doing. I'm really looking forward to working with you and your group as we extend and expand what we're doing. And I think, I know you and I share a lot of the same views, but I just think there are tremendous opportunities to, in the present moment, accelerate these kinds of things again, and they'll feel really fresh because we've all not had that opportunity for a while. So, on behalf of the partnership, Megan, thanks for what you've done and what you will do, and thanks for taking the time with us today.
Thanks, JB, and thank you everybody listening, and look forward to generating hospitality and collaborative teamwork together.
Great, thanks, Megan.